It was Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971. Millions of Americans were settling in to watch the most popular show in the country, Bonanza. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The show was interrupted. President Richard Nixon appeared. He looked nervous. He was about to commit the greatest financial heist in human history. For thousands of years, money was something you could hold. It was heavy, it was rare, it was gold. If you had a $20 bill, it wasn't just paper, it was a claim check. You could walk into a bank and demand the metal. But that night, Nixon looked into the camera and told the world that the window was closed. He wasn't just changing economic policy. He was defaulting on the American promise. In 18 minutes, he severed the link between the dollar and reality. He turned money from a physical object into a government hallucination. We are told this was a necessary evolution. We are told gold was a barbarous relic. But that's a lie. We didn't abandon gold because it failed. We abandoned gold because it worked too well. To understand why we killed gold, you have to understand what gold actually does. Gold is not an investment. It's a referee. For most of human history, kings and emperors had a problem. They wanted to fight wars. They wanted to build palaces. They wanted to buy loyalty. But gold is stubborn. You can't print it. You can't decree it into existence. You have to dig it out of the ground. The ground doesn't care about your politics. This created a natural limit on power. If a king wanted to invade his neighbor, he needed gold to pay the soldiers. If he ran out of gold, the war ended. Gold was a leash, and governments hate leashes. But by the 19th century, the world had formalized this leash into a system, the gold standard. It was a brutal taskmaster. If a country spent more than it earned, gold flowed out of its vaults and into the vaults of its creditors. When the gold left, the money supply shrank. Interest rates spiked. The economy cooled down until the debt was paid. It was an automatic, self-correcting machine. It punished recklessness and rewarded discipline. And for a while, it created the most stable era of global trade in history. Prices in 1910 were roughly the same as they were in 1800. Imagine that. A century without inflation. $1 earned by your great-grandfather bought the same amount of bread when he was an old man. But stability has a price. And that price is that the government cannot save you. When a crisis hits, a crop failure, a panic, a war, the government can't just print money to smooth it over. Under a strict gold standard, the government has to watch the economy bleed until it heals itself. This creates a massive conflict. On one side, you have sound money, honest, harsh, and fair. On the other side, you have politics, the desire to spend money you don't have to fix problems you can't solve. And in 1914, the leash snapped. World War I began. You cannot fight a total war on a gold budget. It's impossible. If the British or French had stuck to the gold standard, the war would have ended in 6 months. They would have gone broke. So they cheated. They suspended the convertibility of their currencies. They printed paper money like confetti to buy bullets and pay soldiers. They sacrificed the value of their money to survive the war. When the smoke cleared in 1918, the major powers tried to go back. They tried to put the genie back in the bottle, but the world had changed. Labor unions were stronger. Voters demanded more. Governments now had a taste of the printing press, and they liked the flavor. The economist Barry Eichengreen calls this era golden fetters. He argues that the gold standard turned a normal recession in 1929 into the Great Depression, because when the economy crashed, central banks couldn't print money to stimulate the system. Their hands were tied by gold. So, one by one, they broke the chains. Britain abandoned gold in 1931. The U.S. followed in 1933, seizing gold from its own citizens to stop them from hoarding it. By the time World War II ended, the old world was dead. Europe was rubble, Japan was ash, and the United States held 80% of the world's official gold reserves. The world needed a new system. And in a hotel in New Hampshire, the U.S. rigged the game. The year is 1944. The place is Bretton Woods. The Allies gather to decide how the global economy will work. They create a system that looks like a gold standard, but is actually a dollar standard. Here was the deal. Every currency in the world, the pound, the franc, the mark, would be pegged to the U.S. dollar. And the U.S. dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. The U.S. told the world, trust us. Our dollar is as good as gold. We have the vaults full. If you ever want the metal, just ask. It was a brilliant trap. By linking everything to the dollar, the U.S. gained a superpower that no other nation had. Exorbitant privilege. If France wanted to buy oil, it had to earn dollars by making wine and selling it. France had to work for its money. But if the U.S. wanted to buy oil, it just printed dollars. For 20 years, this system fueled the American Golden Age. The suburbs, the interstate highways, the military-industrial complex. It was all funded by the fact that the world needed dollars, and only America could print them. But there was a flaw in the math, a fatal cancer growing in the ledger. To keep the world economy running, the U.S. had to export dollars. It had to run deficits. But the more dollars it printed, the less gold it had to back them up. By the 1960s, the ratio was broken. There were far more paper dollars circulating overseas than there was gold in Fort Knox to redeem them. The U.S. was running a fractional reserve banking scheme on a planetary scale, and the French figured it out. President Charles de Gaulle looked at the numbers. He saw that America was printing paper to buy up French factories, fund the Vietnam War, and pay for the Great Society welfare programs. De Gaulle called the bluff. He ordered the French Navy to load up ships with paper dollars, sail them to New York, and demand the gold. Other countries saw this and panicked. Spain, Switzerland, Belgium, they all started lining up at the redemption window. The gold began to bleed out of America. In 1958, the U.S. held 20,000 tons of gold. By 1971, it was down to 8,000 tons. The vault was emptying. This is where the golden fetters tightened again. President Nixon faced a choice, a brutal binary choice. Option A, defend the gold standard. This meant stopping the printing press. It meant raising interest rates to the sky. It meant slashing government spending, ending the Vietnam War immediately, cutting welfare, and plunging the U.S. economy into a massive recession to restore trust in the dollar. It was the honest choice. It was the disciplined choice. Option B, break the promise, keep the gold, screw the creditors, default on the obligation, and unleash the printing press forever. Nixon was a politician. He wanted to get reelected in 1972. He wasn't going to choose a recession. He chose the default. Let's go back to that Sunday night in 1971, Camp David. Nixon and his team of advisors, led by Treasury Secretary John Connally, had spent the weekend in secret meetings. They treated it like a military operation. They knew that if word leaked out, the markets would crash before they could make the announcement. They decided to close the gold window. But listen to the language Nixon used. It was a masterclass in political manipulation. He didn't say, "We are defaulting." He didn't say, "The dollar is now fiat." He said he was directing the secretary to suspend convertibility temporarily. Temporarily. That word was the sedative. It kept the world from panicking. It made it sound like a technical adjustment, a short-term fix to fight off international speculators. But everyone in that room knew the truth. There was nothing temporary about it. When the markets opened on Monday, the world had changed. The anchor was gone. Currencies began to float against each other violently. Foreign governments were furious. They had held dollars, believing they were gold equivalents. Overnight, they were holding paper. When an angry delegation from Europe confronted John Connally about this betrayal, he gave them one of the most savage lines in financial history. He smiled and said, "The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem." This was the moment the modern world began. Before 1971, money was a store of value. After 1971, money became a tool of policy. The result? An explosion of debt. Look at any chart of U.S. debt, inflation, or the gap between productivity and wages. They all break in 1971. It looks like a hockey stick. Without the golden leash, there was no limit to how much the government could borrow. Wars became endless because you didn't have to raise taxes to pay for them. You just sold bonds to the Federal Reserve. Financial bubbles became frequent because every time the market dipped, the central bank could flood the system with liquidity. Housing prices soared. Not because houses became better, but because the money used to buy them became weaker. We traded stability for flexibility. We traded the long term for the short term. So, why did we abandon gold? We didn't abandon it because it was archaic. We didn't abandon it because there wasn't enough of it. We abandoned it because it was incompatible with the modern welfare warfare state. Gold demands that a nation lives within its means. Modern politics requires that a nation lives beyond them. The gold standard was a mirror that showed the government its own ugliness. It showed the cost of every war and every program in real time. Nixon smashed the mirror. But here is the final unsettling twist. If gold is truly a barbarous relic, if it's truly useless in a modern digital economy, why do central banks still hold it? The United States still claims to hold over 8,000 tons of gold in deep storage. Germany holds 3,000 tons. Russia and China have been buying gold aggressively for the last decade, hoarding thousands of tons. If the dollar is the ultimate money, why are the people who print the dollar holding onto the metal? Because deep down they know the truth. Fiat currency, paper money by decree, is based on faith. Faith that the government will not print too much. Faith that the economy will grow forever. Faith that the debt can be rolled over. Gold requires no faith. It requires no counterparty. It is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. We abandoned gold to buy ourselves time, to buy 50 years of growth on credit, to build a world on promises rather than payment. But history shows that every experiment with fiat currency ends the same way. The temptation to print is too strong. The discipline to stop is too weak. We broke the thermometer so we could pretend we didn't have a fever, but the fever is still rising. The debt is now $35 trillion. The interest payments alone are more than we spend on defense. The temporary suspension has lasted 53 years. We didn't fix the problem in 1971. We just made it bigger. And now, looking at the fragile state of the global economy, you have to ask yourself, did we shackle gold, or did we unshackle chaos? If you want to understand where this debt supercycle ends, you need to understand the people who profit from it. Subscribe to this channel. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.